Ranking systems and invisible hierarchies. In meetings, a single number on a dashboard can outweigh weeks of careful work, and the checklist passes while the real outcome fails. The cost is familiar. People start optimizing for the score instead of the job. When a system ranks people or outputs, it does not merely measure performance. It encodes a specific definition of value, then pushes behavior toward that definition through incentives and visibility. Ranking begins as a practical response to a constraint. Attention is limited, time is limited, and managers, reviewers, and users cannot inspect every detail. A score becomes a compression algorithm for judgment. It makes performance portable, easy to carry across teams, quarters, and contexts, and it makes comparison cheap. But compression always discards information, and what gets discarded reveals the system's priorities. Consider a generic performance review that assigns a rating from 1 to 5. The explicit constraint is that evaluators must compare many people within a fixed window, often with incomplete information. The trade-off is clear: speed and consistency versus nuance and context. The moment the rating exists, it becomes a proxy for many things it cannot actually contain: collaboration, risk-taking, mentoring, long-term maintenance, or the decision not to ship a tempting but harmful feature. Now examine incentives. If promotions, bonuses, or access to desirable projects are tied to a rating, the rating becomes a target. A feedback loop forms. What is rewarded becomes more common. What is invisible becomes rare. People reallocate effort toward what is legible to the scoring rubric. They choose work that can be counted, narrated, or attributed. They avoid work that is essential but hard to trace, preventing incidents, reducing complexity, smoothing handoffs, documenting decisions, training others. The system behaves as designed. It amplifies what it can see. Rankings also introduce a second-order effect: competition for relative position. A score may look like an absolute assessment, but rankings are often comparative: distributions, quotas, forced curves, or limited top slots. In that environment, the incentive is not simply to improve, it is to be seen improving more than others. This shifts behavior from contributing to outcomes toward managing impressions. It privileges work that produces frequent visible artifacts: updates, tickets closed, messages sent, meetings attended. It punishes work whose benefits arrive late or diffuse across the group. Portability is another mechanism. A number travels easily across systems, from a project tracker to a quarterly report, from a review form to a hiring screen. That portability is the point. It makes decisions scalable. Yet portability requires standardization, and standardization imposes a constraint on what counts as comparable. Unique contexts become noise. Edge cases become exceptions. Local knowledge is treated as bias. The trade-off is again structural: interoperability versus fidelity. In scoring outputs, the same pattern appears. A content feed that ranks items by predicted engagement must translate human response into measurable signals: clicks, watch time, completion rate, reshares. Those signals are not neutral. They are proxies. They reward what holds attention, not necessarily what informs it. A support queue that ranks by time to close rewards short cases and discourages careful resolution. A school grading rubric that ranks by test performance privileges recall and speed over curiosity and revision. Each system claims to measure quality, but quality is defined by what the system can count under its constraints. Invisible hierarchies form because rankings reorganize status without announcing the value judgment. Once a number exists, it feels objective. Disagreement becomes harder because it sounds like disagreement with the data rather than with the chosen proxy. The hierarchy becomes quieter and therefore more durable. What values are encoded then? First, the value of legibility, what can be audited, compared, and justified. Second, the value of velocity, what can be delivered on schedule and demonstrated in a review window. Third, the value of individual attribution, what can be tied to a single owner rather than to a network of cooperation. These are not inherently wrong values, but they are specific values. And because attention follows rankings, rankings quietly decide what a community treats as real. When attention is allocated by score, responsibility also shifts. People become responsible for the metric rather than for the underlying purpose. Meaning narrows to what improves position. This is a subtle failure mode. The system offers a clean surface: numbers, tiers, leaderboards. and the surface reduces conflict by making choices appear automatic. But the peace is purchased by ignoring what cannot be measured well. Dignity and collaboration, judgment and restraint, care and maintenance, and the courage to slow down when speed would be reckless. Rankings also train identity. When a person is repeatedly scored, the score becomes a mirror. It teaches what to notice about the self. Outputs over relationships, visibility over substance, short horizons over long stewardship. The encoded values become internalized because the feedback loop is frequent, public, and consequential. Consider a single ranking you live under: a performance rating, a queue priority, a dashboard score, a list ordered from best to worst. Examine it as a design, not as a verdict. Name the proxy it uses, and name at least one important thing it cannot see. Notice who benefits when the proxy is treated as the whole truth, and what kind of work becomes rational to abandon when attention is governed by that number. This is not a call to reject measurement. It is an invitation to see measurement's boundary, the constraint that creates it, the trade-off it hides, and the values it smuggles into daily decisions. A ranking is never only a number, it is a hierarchy with a story it refuses to tell. Clarity requires restraint.